Thank you, Sarah and Pete. The only reason I'm still here is because I love you guys. So there you go. That's recorded.
Just Sarah and Pete, or the rest of us?
All of you. Yeah, so hi. I'm Kelly at KD Web, as some of you know already. And today we are going to talk about blogging. I'm trying not to be nervous. But because we're all so different, and we have very, very different businesses in very different industries, I'm going to make it quite general because I tend to pinpoint a person and go off on a little tangent. So I'm not going to do that today. Much more general. So this little blob here is your product or your service. So think about this as your product or your service. It's an inanimate object. It's got no characteristics, yet it's got no behavior. I can just see myself on this screen, so I'm just going to turn it off. It's horrible. Sorry. Things have gone wrong. Okay. So yes, I'm going to make it very general. And I want to prove to you that we can blog about absolutely anything. We're going to blog about a blob. I'm going to get those words mixed up as well. I know it. So what we're doing with blogging is we're looking to produce blog posts that can rank on Google. You're bringing traffic over into your website, onto your domain name. And what we know is that Google loves information because humans are just naturally inquisitive. So what blogging does is we'll build a community for you, and it will make you an authority in your field way above your competitors. So there's three important things about writing a blog post. The very first is to make it truly interesting for the readers and don't leave anything out. The second is structure. And the third is making it visual. We're not talking about key phrases today. I've done a couple of talks about key phrases. Those are the kind of things that you need to research before you get into your blog posts. But let's just talk about what you would write about. So how would you make this little blob that I have today? How would you make that interesting? Everything that you can think about has been written about before. It's all online. We know that. But don't worry about that. Take that out of the equation and make it your own blog post. So have your own take on it and make it your own. Make it memorable. A little bit like this random talk that I'm doing about a blob, and have it target your own audience. So think about the client personas that you may have done when you've been building your business and thinking about who you're selling to. Have them in mind when you're writing your post. And you can bring your personality into the post. Are you funny? Are you quirky? Are you a bit, to the point? What are your values? Let your personality truly come through. Blog posts are really for informing and entertaining people, not just telling people what you've been doing in the week or what you had for breakfast. They really are for showing who you are. So what can we write about this little blob? We all remember that this blob is your product or your service. So I'm using it as a placeholder. So you know all about your own blob. So let's draft out what you would put into a blog post. Whether you've got a product or a service, you can create a very, very useful and interesting blog. I nearly said blob. So what other names can you use for your particular blob? This could be plasticine, it could be clay, it could be sculpture's wax. So describe it. Is it smooth? Is it heavy? I had a concern for the environment when I was making this. So there's a bit of a story behind this blob as well. I looked online to see if I could buy some, decided that the ingredients were awful for the environment, and so decided to make my own. I made slime first, that crazy stuff that's kind of, I don't know, it does its own thing. Got the kitchen into a massive mess. I had loads of fun with this slime that moves really oddly. And my husband came in and he was like, what have you done to the kitchen? So there's a story behind my particular blob. I then created this blob out of environmentally friendly ingredients. And I took the blob on holiday with me to Provence, which was very odd because I went to stay with the family in a house that I couldn't usually afford. And I was taking photos of a little strange blob. I thought it was very weird. But these are all stories that you can include in your blog posts, a bit of backstory. So it's a bit of fun, showing your personality. I could show the audience, my readers, how I made this blob. So I could include the ingredients and the recipe of how I made it. Is this blob edible? I'm not actually going to eat it, but it actually is edible because it's all good ingredients. So is it child friendly? Is it safe for children to use? How can I keep the blob fresh? Do I need to store it in my fridge? Do I need to store it in a cool room in my cave? And how can your blob serve people? Could it be a stress ball? I'm actually finding that as I'm doing this talk, I find it really comforting to have the blob in my hands. It is a bit of stress relief for me. So maybe that promotes better mental health. Could you keep it on your desk to use for another time? Can you make whatever you want out of it? You could maybe put a bit more flour into this one and make it a bit tougher and use it as maybe a bit of muscle strengthening for your hands. So if you become attached to this little blob, is it your friend, your psychologist, perhaps? What kind of shapes can you make out of it? Tell your readers what you can do with this particular blob and add examples. What can you create with it? Could it be used as possibly a desk tidy for those of us that run small businesses? Maybe you can stick a few pens in it here. Can you travel with it? Can you take it on holiday with you like I did? Could it be a seasonal blob? Ooh, just doing two things at once. Could it be a seasonal blob? Could you make it into a Halloween shape, put some little googly eyes on it? Could it be to do with Christmas, make it into an Easter egg? So many things you can do with this particular blob. Perhaps it could be a brand blob product, like maybe Jamie's Tic Tacs that we've all seen. Maybe I can send you a little example for free. You know, text me if you want some. So sometimes remember that items and services can have multiple uses. So how can it benefit your clients? How can it benefit your listeners? Are there products or services that this particular blog complement? You can link over to those particular products or services. Can the blog post lead into sort of a follow-up blog post? So now you've got two blog posts that you could write about. What container or packaging does this particular blob come in? Is it hand wrapped? Is it environmentally friendly? Are there other manufacturers that make a blob like this? Where else can you buy it? Does it come in different colors? Could you make this in brand colors for other businesses? Are there any warnings that you should offer to people? So this particular blob comes with a few warnings. I don't know if you can see my hands. It gets everywhere. You need to, when you're handling it, the color comes off. So how do I clean my hands? How would I know I need to leave this to dry and it will hoover up. but little pieces of this little blob came off everywhere, all over in the posh house in the middle of Provence, which was quite interesting. So what else could you write about? What would you not do? So I advise not to roll this blob along a driveway. Don't put it on this nice, beautiful stone that's next to the swimming pool in the posh house in Provence, because it stains. And don't drop it on the floor of the car. Picks up all the rubbish. So all of this can be included in your blog posts. And it's what people miss out all the time. You need to explain what your blog does. And what you'll do is, as you write about your particular blob, you'll find other topics to explore. So you'll find more topics to write about as you write. You might find a new key phrase that you want to target. And as you write, you should note these down. So number 2, let's just talk about structure whilst I get all this rubbish off my hands. The structure of a blog post. It needs a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like an essay at school that you would remember. We get stuck quite a lot on how long a blog post should be. 1,500 words is great, but if you're doing 1,500 words because you know that you need to do a long blog post and you're repeating yourself, it's not going to be a successful blog post. So don't get stuck, don't get hung up on the number of words. Remember to keep it informative. It's important not to repeat yourself, in fact, and it's important to be really, really clear. If you go off on tangents and you decide in your draft that is maybe for another day, keep that and use it somewhere else. Use it for another blog post, because they again can link up. Always use your heading 1 tag. Leaving a heading 1 tag out will not help search engines. It always needs a heading 1 tag within the blog post, because it tells the search engines what the blog post is about. Break the blog post up and use heading 2s and heading 3s to make sure that you just break up the blog post and make it clear. So what is the next part about? Make sections very, very easy to find, and make paragraphs quite short, because what you'll have to realize is that people scan. They won't read the whole blog post. They scan through to find out the information that they want. So write very well. Make sure you check your spelling and grammar. And then you can find really creative synonyms. So my favorite tool for finding new words, maybe that are sort of a bit boring in your mind, like importance, one of those words that's a little bit overused. A really good website is wordhippo.com. Great for finding new words. In your blog posts, always use links within the paragraphs. So as people are reading, they can continue on their journey and click the link to go over to the new information. So use those links within the paragraphs. Link to internal pages, link to external pages about other blobs. Make sure you're linking to good websites, useful websites, not websites full of rubbish. You're creating a user experience and a journey. A really good idea at the end of a blog post is to finish with bullet points. So a summary of what the blog post was about. And these will often end up on the first page of Google under the SERP features, which you'll see sometimes as an accordion on the very first page at the top of Google. Good way of getting onto those. And the third point is add images. So use your images to strengthen the blog post, divide the blog post up. And obviously with a much longer blog post, you can use more images as long as they're relevant to the text. they're really important because humans are just so visual when they're reading things, and it's nice to break up all of that information. Images will also appear on what we call the image pack on Google, which is a featured snippet, and they will appear in on their own independently on Google's image search. So they're so important. And what works with images? You can use infographics, you can use charts. I often use sort of labels and pointers on mine. I'm just going to try and get you back so I can share my screen. So labels and pointers, and you can use Canva, which is a free tool that you can use, and you can put all of these things onto your own images. So just sharing my screen. So you can take them yourselves with your smartphones as well. This is a picture of I did earlier of my blog. Use your smartphones. They're so good for taking images, and you can use them on your blog post because it means that you've got original images instead of stock photos. And then overlay your images with your text, the title of your blog post, whatever it is that you're writing about. I love to brand mine, so I'll always put my logo on them, because obviously as they're found in searches, it's that recognition, isn't it? So just get creative with what you're doing with your images as well. And so you really can see that you can blog about a blog. You really can blog about anything. I knew I was going to do it. So
blogging workshop.
So I have got a blogging workshop for you to join me on if you would like to. It's on at the end of October, and we've got 2 days. We've got it across 2 weeks, just 2 days, 2 hours per day. And this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be covering in the blogging workshop. I won't leave that on screen. I'll put some stuff in the chat so that you can see exactly what we're doing on those days. And obviously, we've got a discount for Outside Ideas. So if you would like to join me on my workshop, you're very welcome, and you'll have a discount with this code that's on screen now. But I'll put all that in the chat for you. And yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen.